really fine to just wander into any old topic,
Mhm.
but I can't guarantee I'll have anything clever to say about any particular topic. If you want to go into the Lydian scale or whatever, you're gonna have to lead the way on that one, I think.
I mean, that's my one area of expertise is the Lydian mode. Um, yeah, cool, man. Well, yeah, I figure like whenever we have conversations, it's always a good conversation. It's always like fairly like tunnel visiony, and so I figure we just have one of those, and like you're definitely more anarcho than me, but I feel like I'm anarcho, but not
adjacent.
Yeah, I'm not as like passionate about it, but I'm in that same zone. So like if we can tie that back to like sort of our other things like physics and creativity, that'd be cool, or like art and music, wherever possible, that'd be cool. But anyway, all right, well, we're here on the Bridge podcast. I'm with my friend Daniel. Daniel runs the Anark YouTube channel where he goes over political philosophy, specifically related to anarcho-syndicalism. Daniel, welcome. Is that a fair description of what you do on your channel?
Yeah. Well, I mean, other than perhaps that I might have wandered away from the label anarcho-syndicalist, more towards just calling myself an anarchist at this point.
Okay.
And there are a bunch of other little specifiers. I'm an specificist. I have some particular focus on communalism. Yeah, but yeah, no, I mean, it's true. The channel's focus is on anarchist theory and the philosophy that underpins it. It's not only just theory, however, it's also practice, how one might actually build a revolutionary future, what sorts of actions we might carry out in order to build it ourselves as well.
Beautiful. Well, I'm excited to talk about communism and capitalism, and I wanted to start with a different C word, which is coffee. How does coffee fit into your life, if it does still? Is it just the sort of icebreaker question I always start with?
Honestly, I love coffee. I'm sort of a caffeine addict in a general sense, like I love caffeine. And personally, insofar as coffee goes, my most recent love affair with coffee was mostly like bulletproof coffee, which, I just found that it did what it advertised. It really did give me this intense mental euphoria. It felt like all the gears were turning right. It almost felt nootropic, right? It almost felt nootropic. And I really enjoyed, and I still do enjoy bulletproof coffee. It's just when I'm not on keto, it seems like way too much fat to put in my body, Yeah.
Dude, I've been crunching my numbers for various food stuff, and like my fat is insane. Like I make a meal shake and just 200 grams of fat right in there.
For real.
But like I cannot for the life of me gain 1 fucking pound. So anyway. So do you do it with like butter and MCT or just the butter or cool?
Yeah, I use heavy whipping cream butter, MCT oil, and I'll often put in just a splash of like almond milk or something because it like gives it a little bit more body. It cools it down a little bit as well. And then maybe like a tiny bit of like 1 packet of stevia or something. You know what I'm saying? And I find that's really good, and it just replaces your breakfast completely.
Totally. But with the MCT, do you do the fancy expensive like C8 caprylic stuff, or do you do the Lauric and Capric as well?
No, I started at the bottom of the rung on that. Okay. Like I started by seeing like, what is the cheapest way I can get monochain triglycerides, right? And so I actually did like straight coconut oil and would just throw it in there and shake it up super hard and it would just become. But, I actually did find that the little bit of investment in a better quality MCT oil was what really made a big difference. The taste was a lot better. It seemed to work a lot better. It was a better consistency. It dissolved better. All that stuff drove me to continually trying better and better quality MCT oils as I went. And now I'm actually buying the bulletproof MCT oil. But I know that there's even some that are claiming to be better MCT oils, and I haven't tried any of those.
Are you talking like the? We don't have to talk about bulletproof coffee that long, but
this is a long conversation about MCT oil, my friend. I don't know if you got an audience for this.
When you say the bulletproof stuff, do you mean like the brain octane, or like the whatever they call it, like the ecstasy oil or XTC?
Yeah,
oil?
brain octane is what they're calling it. It's their MCT oil, right? Like, yeah.
It is so good, but it's so fucking expensive, and
God,
I
I
hate
know.
knowing that the guy that runs the company is making any money from me, because he's a schmohawk. But anyway, cool. Well, now I know what your copy is like these days. Let's talk about politics. Cool. So, okay. So first of all, so there's this dude that I know who is kind of like the communist guy in a friend of mine's circle. And I brought up the syndicalism thing to him. And honestly, I feel like he had so many like, oh, but this and this. And I was like, but you guys are on the same fucking team. Like, so how much variety is there within your sort of sphere of, this communist? I mean, I know you said you moved away from syndicalism in terms of name, but like, how much variety is there within this community?
Okay, well, I mean, how much variety is there in the community that you might say of leftism? Like an astonishing variety, like so much that it's mind-blowing. If you're talking about the sorts of people that I personally, the community that I place myself in, I'm purposely trying to cultivate an anarchist community, or an anarchist and libertarian socialist community. Personally, and this is because I've read a lot of history. That response that you got indicates to me that person is probably more of like an authoritarian leftist. They probably they want to use the state. They think the state is going to do all of these capacities of reorganization that need to be done. And I am decidedly anti-statist. And what you'll find is, there's this first inclination when you find out that anarchists and whatever authoritarian leftists are trying to get to this same goal of communism, that you might say, there's a presumption that the best thing to do would be for everybody to group together and try to make some solidified front that will have the power to get the work done. But what you start realizing when you study the history is that when the rubber meets the road, these two views of the world are in extreme conflict. The anarchist is fundamentally, theoretically predicated on not building hierarchies of power, okay? Not institutionalizing hierarchies of power. Imbalances in power, you can't really change. That's just how it is. People, there's both nature and nurture. You get imbalances of power, right? It's about institutionalizing power. It's about creating permanent hierarchies wherein some people are given power over the lower rungs in the hierarchy. This becomes a bottleneck on our fundamental ability to reorganize power in society and to give power back to the people. Whereas authoritarian leftists want to build a state, an incredibly centralized, powerful state that takes all things into its hands and then reorganizes society to its will. And you'll find that though we both suppose to have the same end goal, it is very apparent from our actions that we can't really cooperate, number one, because we are sabotaging one another as soon as we act in these opposite ways, okay? And number two, I've become increasingly skeptical that the vision that authoritarian leftists have of communism is in fact the communism of classical theory. It almost seems like they want some kind of weird dystopian world where everything is hyper controlled and hyper regulated, and there's like this incredibly powerful police state that has complete central power and controls everything to itself. I don't know how that can ever become the world that we hope to create. So this is, I guess, sort of my best explanation to help you understand why they probably had that response, and understand why, in fact, I do not have this left unity perspective, and that I am very much narrowly and a libertarian socialist and an anarchist.
Gotcha. So in your mind, is the anarchist label is the umbrella term under which leftism is, or is left? No. Is the leftist thing?
I would say the broadest category we're looking at here is the left. And in fact, there's some contention that the left is a thing, precisely for the reasons I just discussed. But leftism is, in my opinion, fundamentally predicated on the idea of labor politics, I guess is the easiest way to say it. The idea that the workers should own the means of production, kind of something we're more familiar with saying, but maybe more broadly, we might say social ownership of the administration of society. Okay, that's really kind of more broadly what's going on in leftist politics. And you'll find that if you get all the way to communism, you have full social ownership. Everybody has complete control over every aspect of society. That's the ideal of communism, right? Mm-hmm. The statists think that can happen by means of a state. Okay, they think that a state can like represent you, like that it can act in your stead, you might say. Whereas the anarchists believe that that is a naivety, that that is a reproduction of the same logic of capitalism, that somebody else can act in my stead, that there are those who like deserve to administrate society, there are those who deserve to have all of the power, and then there are those that just simply act in service to those others, right? Mm-hmm. So what you'll find is this is kind of the fundamental split between those who want to use the state in order to achieve this social ownership of society, and those who believe that social ownership means that the actual society, the actual people should have control over that society. So you'll find that one has a highly centralizing tendency and one has a highly decentralizing tendency.
And I think that we're both on the same page in being very much about decentralization and sort of like a bottom-up type thing. And I mean, it sounds like largely the issue with the state side is that's a top-down sort of like if you're in power, great for you, like everything's going to be wonderful, I'm sure, but like there's no sort of reasonable self-organizing thing that can happen if it's from the top down. So I mean, I saw that you were mentioning some stuff about complex systems in one of the other videos, and that's totally my jam, although like from the perspective of like a musician. So can you talk a little bit about complex systems, or like how you think something like that might emerge from, the bottom?
Yeah, so I think it's perfect that you would bring that up, because in fact, it was the next place I was going to go. I think that's the fundamental limit on why their system doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Why in demonstration, why they shut out the anarchists, they sabotaged and destroyed their projects. They stopped any libertarian socialism from rising. They even stopped states which were on the more libertarian socialist side, such as Yugoslavia at the time. So they really went straight for their centralizing authoritarian tendency. And what they have to show for it is a bunch of states that devolved back into capitalism, essentially, right? And so the reason when I'm looking at this, I'm not coming from it in an ideological perspective now. At this point, I'm coming from it in a systems analysis function. I'm really looking at like, well, how did you build the machine that does the things you're saying, right? And the way, and given that you built your machine in that way, you built the political machine that's going to carry forth your future in a particular way. What are its tendencies going to be? What, because of its construction, is it going to become, right? And this is very much like my physics approach in mind. I'm really thinking about this in the way that like engineering a machine functions, or the way that systems have to uphold certain conservation laws, but other places there's no conservation laws, and how things are engineered such that they carry out those needs, right? I think about things in this very systems oriented way. And it seems to me that the system they have built is not actually built to be complex, which is what they claim. They say that it's needed in order to confront a complex society. It actually seems to me that the exact opposite is true. And what they've built is a system that strangles creativity, that strangles the ability of us to actually overcome a complex society. What they think is the way you overcome a complex society is through like this hyper centralized bureaucratic coordination. But it turns out that if you actually analyze how such a system might work, that doesn't make you more complex. That doesn't help you overcome complex things better. That helps you try to simplify the world into a thing that you can control. It's as if you're trying to take complexity and simplify it, and then project simplicity back onto the world. You're projecting the simplicity, you're gathering the simplified data, then you're projecting back onto the world what you have built as per your simplified data. So I don't know if I've jumped too far ahead here, but the way I look at it is, okay, so if we're kind of starting from chaos theory, Now, in chaos theory, we have this idea that a system is more chaotic by measure to the fact that as I have some doubt in my input, I will have very large doubt about my output, essentially, right? Little tiny amounts of my error in an understanding where the information starts leads to huge amounts of error just a little ways away. Okay, so that's what's happening in chaotic systems. In fact, that's almost like the rigorous definition of what a chaotic system is. Now, here's the thing.
Ergodicity or whatever.
I think that might be what that's referring to. But the idea is essentially, you know, even in a highly chaotic system, if I understood the system perfectly correct, and I had perfect data, I could still predict everything perfectly. The problem is that in chaotic systems, tiny amounts of error turn into massive amounts of error. Okay, so here's the thing. When you engineer any kind of system, you're trying to reduce that to some degree, right? Because then you can't specify what a component 3 or 4 rungs down the way is going to do. You know, if I have a bunch of gears turning and they have to turn in a very specific kind of way with one another in order to carry out their functions, well, I need information to be conveyed very efficiently between them. I don't want there to be almost any error. Chaos down is what we're trying to do. We're trying to go straight to order, okay? As much order as conceivably possible, which means reducing the error in the conveyance of information from one juncture to the next. Here's the problem. You can't actually reduce the error. What they have to do instead, in many of these capacities, they are fundamentally limited by their ability to gather the data about the world they're trying to interact with. So that means right off the bat, they've got a system where error is coming in. You just got error right off the bat in their ability to measure the world. Okay, so then that means they built a highly specified system that has already washed out a bunch of complexity right off the bat as soon as it gathers information about the world. And then it is a highly bureaucratized, simplified thing such that it has steady power conveyance from one component to the next. And therefore, it is going to act back on the world in a highly simplified fashion, which is then going to try to constrain the complexity of the world. But the thing is this is the logic of how a machine works. But we're talking about human beings and ecologies and, you know, societies here. Okay, you can't actually wash out all that complexity. And if you do, you will destroy everything that is beautiful about any of those systems. Everything that actually makes those systems what they are will be destroyed in the process. So this brings us to, I suppose, this concept I've been studying a lot lately, and which will come into my work very soon, even a lot more, is this concept of self-organized criticality. Okay, so if you were to look at a graph of chaos and order, okay, what you would find is right upon the cusp of chaos and order, this is where the behavior of emergence takes place. Okay, but here's the thing. In order for you, you might say that all authoritarians want a hyper-ordered system, thinking that a hyper-ordered system is a hyper-rational system, right? But here's the thing. If the anarchist is saying, I want self-organized criticality, they are inherently asking them to dismantle their system. They're inherently asking anyone who is trying to perfect order to stop. And that doesn't mean that they want chaos, because once again, it's upon the cusp of order and chaos. It has to have flexibility in its elements. So the anarchist will appear to all those who want a stifling and suffocating political order as the devil. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I think I guess like I peruse stuff about chaos and complexity and all that. I think that our language is fairly similar, but in my mind, there's order, then there's sort of unordered, and then there's disordered. But like with ordered, it's like, to what degree is there clarity? Like, can you, like with a very simple system, you can predict this causes that. There's a clear chain of causality. With a more complicated system, which can like appear complex, but it's like, it's still complicated. It's just like, it's not clear what the causality is. But then maybe there's, you know, complex where it's like more about you have to probe and feel sort of the dynamics of something. And then chaos for me is like kind of like no causal clarity, and it's only there for novelty and innovation. because otherwise there's nothing to do there. But I'm not sure if that resonates with you in terms of definitions or terminology.
What you're saying, of course, makes perfect sense. I mean, you know, those are all dynamics at play. I would say in this, you know, it might be that what, like, we're essentially looking at graphs with more than one axis here, right? So like one, we could develop the graph of just order and chaos by way of these simple means of what we've just discussed: ability to predict based upon input information, based on, you know, the output information. That we could just build the graph. And then what I'm saying about that cusp is what you would find. We might then become interested, what's happening upon that entire line of the cusp? And then we could analyze it, of course, in extra axes and ask ourselves, oh, well, you know, also what could be causing the chaos, right? Okay, and we put another axis extending out. It's like, oh, well, the chaos it could not have to do with complexity. It could be that we have simplicity and complexity on a whole axis here. We could look at that whole axis as well. And then maybe we'd have like a 3D region we're looking at, kind of thing, right? And we could do this on and on, to be honest, and it might be valuable to do so. But I would say I'm interested, in a general sense, all of this applies very directly to these precepts of centralization, the usage of highly organized bodies of coordination, as opposed to the anarchists who want more flexible, more decentral systems. And what you'll find if you analyze those two approaches is that actually, by measure of the value of complexity, which has mathematical measures, right? That the anarchist system is actually one that would produce more complexity, not less. And that what looks like complexity in this hyper bureaucratization is not complexity. It's actually homogenization, you might say, right?
So you're saying you would get more complex results with like less, like more bang for your buck in terms of generating complexity in the sense of beauty, rather than like, this is a very like convoluted, complex, complicated system that's like gonna look like it's doing a bunch of fancy stuff, but like a bunch of stuff's falling through the cracks and like, you know, having like bugs, you know, go off and sort of decay or whatever. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, you're precisely understanding exactly what I'm saying. And I think it's because of this long rant, because of the information I was discussing in my long rant to begin with, right? It's because of this fundamental inability to actually convey information properly. And might I add, I mean, because I noticed you use the language of it having bugs. And I would just really like to emphasize that I think 99% or greater of all of the things we might see as bugs in the system are nothing of the sort. They are, in fact, they are baked into what the system must be in order for it to function as it does. And that a lot of these aspects of subjugation, domination, coercion, deception, and all of that just fundamentally arises out of the mechanics of the system as it's been built. I mean, okay, so you remember how I said it wants to make everything into a machine, right? We are the components.
Right.
You want to be a cog? You know, like, is that what you, because that's what they need us to be in order for that to function. They need us to be like cogs in a machine, right? Not like an ecology, which responds and is complex and has many different nodes, and the flows of the system change and displace themselves, and the relations all alter as they need to in order to respond to varying stimuli. None of that. No, instead, the varying stimuli to be reduced. The people themselves that have complex needs to be reduced. Everything is to be put into the schema of a machine. And that is to me antithetical to the life impulse, to the creative impulse of humanity.
Yeah. So I guess a lot of the problems arise in trying to apply simple or complicated things to complex, or, you know, it seems like there's like when you put the wrong thing in the wrong category, it sort of goes awry. So I'm curious if you're familiar with this idea of annealing, like neural annealing.
I'm not familiar with that phrase, no.
So I guess the term annealing comes from metallurgy, but basically there are these people promoting this idea of neural annealing as kind of like this, you know, you inject a lot of high energy, in the case of neurons here, but like I feel like you could, you know, see humans as the neurons of the brain country or whatever. So like you inject a ton of energy by whatever sort of means, say like, you know, some sort of compound, and basically it's like applying a huge amount of temperature that melts things down, and then it recrystallizes in an emergent sort of self-organizing criticality type thing. And so that's an interesting sort of like other world to me that I feel like has artistic implications, but like I feel like this is what you're somewhat getting at on the societal level. So I'm curious, where does this self-organization come, or like how else do you see this coming about?
Well, anarchism is primarily predicated on how all of the ways that society functions will be reorganized as per the directly democratic desires of everyone within society. That society will be taken away from atomization, competition, power hierarchy, and instead power will be maximally distributed. The hierarchies of power will be minimized, which say, of course, maybe it's not possible to ever completely eliminate them, but we will be in a process of constant minimization, and the power will be distributed. The ability to control the social flow of power will be distributed. But it's not that, everybody doesn't have to distribute their personal powers of self, right? What makes them efficient and effective. It's not about making every single human being equal in a fact of their actual ability to control the world. That's not possible. It's instead making it to where the ability to control the social flow of power is not monopolized, that in fact it is distributed in as much as possible. Now, one of the ways to achieve this is decentralization, but we also shouldn't fetishize decentralization, because in fact, there will be needs for wide-scale coordination, but it's instead that need must always root from the bottom. So if there are these bodies wherein everybody makes a decision together, it is not that somebody, quote unquote, representing everybody makes that decision for them. It is that everybody who is involved in that process is now grouped together to make a decision. This might be called, I've learned that this has a name apparently in political theory I'd never heard. It's called subsidiarity. Those who are affected decide. Okay. And in anarchism, subsidiarity is just taken to its hyper level. Okay. Essentially, everywhere where there is a power hierarchy, where there are those who control the total social flow of power or monopolize it, that is supposed to be reduced and then distributed to the people. Their ability to control that thing should be distributed. So in a practical sense, what does that mean? Democratically, they should have council bodies where they just make decisions about how society will function. If we're talking about doing very large scale projects of reforming society as it might stand, we want to create enormous agoras, places where people actually can come in their communities and make decisions together. We confederate all of those council structures together. They're now in bodies at various scales where you have a municipal, now all of these councils vote singularly, but their votes combine into this municipal level, or you use delegation, things like that, essentially, where you're going to have various levels and scales, and you will have one that will be fully unified. That's everybody making a decision together, because everybody is affected by X decision, right? So I also am not trying to say that anarchism fetishizes decentralization, but it just turns out that a huge number of powers are currently way too centralized. And the solution is a lot more decentralization, right? And that's what needs to happen in order for a bunch of these things to become more effective. So how does anarchism say we carry that out? It says we reclaim power where it can be gained. We take it back from the systems as they stand, and we neuter the systems as they stand from enforcing their power upon us, therefore also reducing their power hierarchy. So the goal for the anarchists is then to develop the praxis, which does those things. How do we build our own power, concept we sometimes call dual power, and how do we diminish the enemy's power? So there's a constructive and a destructive capacity to anarchism.
Okay. It seems also as if, besides the distribution of power, it seems like there's some benefit to be had in terms of flexibility from having this more modular distribution of things. Is that something that is talked about in technical terms at all in this world?
Well, I mean, the thing is what I would say is, in some ways, one of the weaknesses of the way anarchists have approached this topic is that, okay, it has this really long history to it, but the idea is that planning things really closely and like specifying very exactly in anarchist theory is often seen as naive or like castles in the sky kind of thinking, right? Whereas they think the practical approach is instead that no, you need to feel out the conditions as they play out, understand how things are going to be, and then you adjust to how things are going to be. You build within the circumstances that are available up until the thing that you desire to see happen. But I think that sort of like forgets that we are building towards something in this process. To know what if you're going to achieve something, you have to be able to discuss what you're going to achieve. So right, yeah. I personally am a way more constructionist, you might say, anarchist. And there are some that are. And so they're weirdly, as odd as this sounds, they're called utopian socialists or utopian anarchists for doing so. I personally don't care about any of that, and I think it's a little bit silly to call it utopian. To me, it seems practical. It's like, no, we actually have to what? Okay, let's say I actually carry out like an armed revolution or something. Okay, let's say that's what takes place, and I'm just going to rebuild society right after that. You think we just don't need to have any conversations about that beforehand, about what we might want to put in place afterwards? Yeah, I think maybe we might have an idea of how we're going to restructure the supply chains and infrastructure. And, like this is a complex conversation. And I feel like I personally like having it. So I've provided some examples in my video after the revolution. I give an example of what you might say is a good, it'd be like a transition society, like what that society is that I just described that you'd want to put in place if you were to be able to carry out what I said. But also, I'm actually very constructivist in how I propose the revolution takes place insofar as praxis. I've made a video called Constructing the Revolution. I will be going even more into detail about the things that I think should be done in the video series that I'm currently writing, including this more technical approach. Now, insofar as, because you also mentioned the word modular in that question, some people very much have a view that what needs to be done is needs to be made this one little modular model that everybody can pick up and then turn towards their circumstance, and then pick up and then it just proliferates like that. I think that's valuable. Insofar as that can be made, I'd support it if it's effective. I do have some doubts about the limitations of being able to build something so truly modular. It's going to be able to address itself to every circumstance, right? But I think that if indeed something like that were going to be done, because it's the kind of thing I endeavor towards, what would have to be within this module is the capability to understand how the module itself would have to be changed towards your circumstances. Right. So that's hard though, right? That's really hard. How do you build that in? That's the question. The ability for your modular suggestion to adjust to circumstance.
And be adaptive and all, yeah. Yeah, I feel like that has the opportunity to adapt in the wrong way. And then
exactly, it could just become statism again. They're like, I'm adapting, man. I'm adapting. I'm just using, all the enemy's tactics. I'm adapting, It's like, okay, I don't think that's not what I meant.
So there's this dude, Dave Snowden, who I feel like he's the guy that I sort of like, he's like my complexity guy. And he talks about how like the way to manage complexity or do complexity management is to have a bunch of safe to fail things going in parallel, find what resonates, amplify it, and like strengthen it basically. And I feel like there's a lot of this sort of vibe of like, we're going to plan the perfect thing to implement and it's going to be perfect. And like, probably when it's implemented, it's going to like have its problems. So do you feel like there is any sort of effort to like put a ton of different ideas out there, see what works like in parallel, where it's kind of like there's an opportunity for it to fail without any repercussions?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's one of the strengths of anarchism, because it rejects that modular thinking where you're just building this little model that's just going to do all the work. Because it rejects that, it's extremely experimental. That's one of its strengths. That's the reason it's continuing on into this era past where all of the revolutions are gone and behind us. Why you still see anarchism being so successful is because it was always a very flexible mentality, right? So insofar as we're talking about all the different kinds of projects, like quote unquote safe to fail projects, well, I mean, you could get, I don't know about the concept of safe to fail, because you have to take risks to do big things sometimes. And when you scale up, safety is going to go down, right? When your safety of failure goes down, because now the thing supports more people. It's a structure that holds people up in the process. So I think that you have to take some risks in the safety factor, but I do think that we do want to experiment with a wide variety of solutions. So just insofar as we're getting practical, because I'm a very sometimes what I say is very abstract, right? But like, for example, building neighborhood councils is something that is happening quite a bit within the movement right now. Essentially, or block committees, as they're sometimes called, or popular assemblies. It's essentially where what you're trying to do is you're trying to get all of the people that are responding to some issue in an area together. And it's almost like you're building a union of the people, you might say. And then they come together and they create one of these council structures. And in this council structures, they decide together through processes of consensus. They create proposals which they will then carry forth and act on in their lives. And they together begin making a democratic community. You create democracy in that community, a direct democracy, not this farce democracy that we have.
Right.
And that is one of the first atoms of this new society often. So, but is that the only thing? No, people do community gardens, and the community garden as a project brings people together, decentralizes food production, decommodifies food production. Free stores are another example. These are all examples of something called mutual aid, right? Mutual aid is all of these sorts of examples. Everybody coming together using cooperative instinct in order to hold up one another as a species. But there's lots and lots of these examples, an astonishing variety of different kinds of things, kinds of approaches people are doing, but then there's also, there's the more sort of like militant aspects where people are like squatting, for example. In Greece, you have Exarchaea, where an entire area of the city has essentially been squatted and defended militantly, and the police have just ceded it to the Greek anarchists. It's an entire part of the city. And what I would like to see is, of course, that be more democratized, but that's another matter entirely. But like, there are tons and tons of examples all taking place. There are people who are establishing what are called, Kropot would have called them free cities. They're called intentional communities now.
Yeah.
But like, intentional communities where people go out and they go, oh no, this entire community, we're going to build only houses. Everybody here is in a democratic situation with one another. We farm our food and distribute it. We are a little self-sufficient economy. So I just have to stop, because in fact, the variety of experiments is that huge, right? Like that.
Gotcha,
yeah, I could just go on forever.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I guess that makes sense to like sort of like lead by example. It's like our democracy is obviously, like you said, a farce, so it's like if somebody's going to do it right, it probably should be done on a small scale to like be like, we figured it out over here, like happy to open source this, and like you can take it and, but yeah, I guess I'm not sure what else I was going to say on that.
Well, no worries. I'll just keep rambling if you like, but
well, so I have localism written down in my notes here, and like I feel like when you say localism, some people are like, and I know that there are probably a bunch of branches of localism, like there are a ton of branches of anarchism and libertarianism, but is there anything in that zone that's of interest to you, or that like serves in alignment with what you're up to?
I mean, once again, that's a fundamental precept within anarchism, is trying to be contextual, is trying to be localistic, is trying to understand, what the landscape of this area actually is, and trying to meet that need. Because part of the complexity, remember what we discussed about centralization destroying complexity. Well, what is the very complexity it's destroying? It's destroying how things vary over these small distances, right? And the smaller the distance, the more that complexity gets washed out. So when anarchism is attempting to restore complexity, then of course what it's attempting to do is go back and restore all of those places the details were washed out. And of course, the most fundamental place those details are washed out is down on the localistic level, between small groups of people, and then within communities, and within local ecologies, and within cities, and so on. So the anarchist is often very focused on this localistic approach, and this is often an extremely a fundamental component of how anarchists approach their problem. So the big overarching thing here, and this is one of the foundational principles of anarchism, is that there is what's called means ends unity in anarchism. Okay. So, there's this famous saying that the means justify, or the ends justify the means. Well, the anarchist just rejects that out of hand. And that's because what the anarchist brings up is that the ends and the means can't really be disentangled.
Right.
The means you choose determine the ends you will achieve, right? In this very systems-oriented way, where it's like, well, if you choose the ways of the enemy, you can't achieve the ends you've set out. So those means just now have to be off the table because certain ends will be unachievable, right? So what the anarchist says is, no, I need means that are consistent with my ends, right? And I might add maximally consistent, because they can't be perfectly consistent, right? I can't just go right to communism right now. That's not possible. Society wouldn't allow it. But trying to figure out what is the vehicle, what is the seed of the tree I want to see grow look like, right? And trying to understand that connection between now and then. And therefore, if I want a society of complexity, I have to understand what the local components are of any place, not only in its community, but in its ecology as well. Understanding what that ecology's actual, content and context is. All of that is so important in anarchism. But what I would bring up is that anarchism isn't narrowly localistic. It is based upon another principle called solidarity. And solidarity is the concept that, essentially we're all in this together. Right? It's not just about my self-interest. It's also about the interest of all, and understanding that my self-interest is intertwined with the interest of all, right? So with that in mind, this explains why, as you said, the living example is so much a model for the anarchist. It's about the unity of means and ends. And it also goes back to the critique, of course, of everything that I've said so far. Criticizing this hypersensation, the authority. It's a rejection of means ends unity. They don't understand. They think they can just use any means to achieve their ends. And so, that's what I would say about localism. There's of course all kinds of other stuff, but
yeah, I'm being told my internet is pooping. Am I freezing up for you at all?
Nope. You look pretty good. You're the tiniest bit of roboting for a second, but
okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully this is good now. Okay, so with the ends and the means thing, I guess that's, the whole ends justify the means thing sounds like that. When you go down that road, it's like not good things. But so I feel like this whole world of persuasive talk, I've heard described as the dark arts, and I'm curious, that sort of ends justify the means thing. To me, that's very much like a dark arts thing of don't worry, it'll be great when it's finished, and don't worry about what's going to happen in the meantime. To what extent is that reasonable to ever have any of that? I feel like your thing is it's more of this intellectual thing that you have to fully take in. But what am I trying to say? That with the dark arts thing, that's I feel like they're trying to be okay, I'm just going to cheat a little bit and get to the thing quicker. But in doing that, you're going to create problems. Is there any room for any sort of persuasive dark art like that?
Well, I don't know what you mean by dark art. You're going to have to give me a little more detail.
Well, I mean, just
you're saying insofar as using means of coercion or deception, or even just maybe a sort of persuasion where it's so forceful that you're forcefully changing the way people's minds work and all of that. Propaganda, you might say, the creation of propaganda.
Yeah. I mean,
yes.
how different is persuasion from deception? I feel like they're on a similar spectrum.
What I would say is, I personally, just insofar as we're talking about my, there's kind of two different answers to this question. What is my personal approach, and what do I think is within the range of acceptable, things that can be done? Obviously, I'm trying to align the two, but I'm just saying, personally, I would say persuasion differs from, deception insofar as that in persuasion, you're not telling them any falsehoods, right? You're not telling in deception, you're actually telling them false things, either about the world or themselves or something. And I think that's the real issue. You're actually giving them, you're not telling them how the world actually works. You're just trying to change their minds by any means. And what I think is that's endurable. I think that's not really going to last a lot of the time. Or if it does last, it will often lead to really bad things. It might also lead to them. And when I say it's endurable, they get into a conversation with somebody else, and then they want to bring up this talking point that you've weaponized inside their head, but it's a lie. And that person knows it's a lie. They're just going to crumble. They're just going to crumble. So you built somebody who now does not have a strong understanding of the world. And therefore, as soon as anything goes wrong, they're just going to fall right out of this mentality. So I think that deception is often endurable. I think it's coercive, probably shouldn't be done. And I don't think it needs to be done, is the point I would make. Insofar as what is the extent of this dark arts? Well, the thing is I will say that there's a sort of like component of force that is taking place in any of this propagandizing, right? I mean, I would say propaganda is not bad by itself. Propaganda is based upon the word propagate. Its most primary purpose is propagating an idea, right? It's not that it's not, and that could be bad, propagating bad ideas, right? But it's propaganda to create something that is purely focused upon propagation in my mind. And that's the way it's kind of traditionally used as well. And so I would say I create propaganda. That's exactly what I'm doing, is trying to create propaganda. I'm trying to propagate ideas in this process. And I don't think it's bad to create propaganda either. So this is kind of, I guess, what you're getting at with this dark arts thing. I think it's in fact good to make propaganda if it's also true. There's no deceit taking place, and it is towards outcome, right? So in so far as like making things really quippy or like boiling them down into phrases and words that people are going to be able to, making them mimetic, for example. I think that stuff all has a great deal of value. And I should also say that I think that the usage of coercive force is justified insofar as that if we have built that replacement, so if we've got that dual power that's there and it's like developed and it's starting to build like these real networks and it's starting to build confederations and all of that, I would consider an act of self-defense for them to overthrow this hyper-centralized authority. Therefore, I support revolution. Therefore, of course, I support the usage of coercive force under those circumstances. But I also don't think that all coercive force is bad. It's not that it's force that makes it bad. Once again, when I defend myself from somebody trying to murder me, I use force, right? And I might even say that I'm coercing them to do so. Right? Like if I'm like, fighting them or holding them against the ground, that's coercion. And it's not bad, therefore, to use coercive force in all occasions. It's instead to say that what is bad is establishing institutions of hierarchicalized power, right? It's not about me defending myself from force. It's about establishing a permanent situation wherein this layer of people has institutional power over this layer of people. That's the real issue. So I would say, insofar as we're about like the dark arts in that way, I guess like probably what people might consider quote unquote things that are bad means, I think we really do need to think about in a little more of a holistic sense about what is actually bad. For example, trying to understand the difference between aggression and self-defense, but on a social level. Right. I think this is part of the argument I've made to people before is they are like, well, revolution is just like this inherently, aggressive, oppressive act. And it's like, no more than a slave escaping a plantation is an aggressive or oppressive act, or a slave breaking their own chains or having to kill their own master to escape or whatever. I would support the slave. I would support the slave personally. Right. So, and why? Because the slave is under oppression. We clearly see this as an act of self-defense. They're just trying to free themselves from a situation of oppressive authority. And so therefore, I don't think revolution is anything other than self-defense. It's us trying to get out from under this horror, this suffocating, stifling authoritarianism. So I guess that's a really long answer to a relatively simple question.
With like the whole dark arts thing, I guess like there's plenty of dark arts going on in American government right now anyway. So like, you know, just because it's Joe Biden doesn't mean it's not dark arts. But so I mean, I should mention, by the way, that I feel like, you know, I know your general stance is on like scientific skepticism and your like metaphysics and praxis and all. And I would say that I have generally been aligned with you, but like my credences in a lot of things have become a lot more abstract and hyper skeptical. So like, I feel like in general, I'm just kind of like, like, I don't believe that anything exists. Like I'm sort of more hyper nihilistic like that.
You're a big S skeptic. You're not a scientific skeptic anymore. You're just you're an old style Baronian skeptic, is what you're saying.
I guess what's a Baronian skeptic?
Well, I mean, yeah, we can talk about that. I mean, I find that all very interesting. I still abide by the scientific skeptic line because I think that trustworthy knowledge and knowledge which we can rely on is best found through a scientific epistemology. And when I'm trying to sort what is true from what is false, then I am not assuming everything is true and then disproving it. I'm assuming everything is not true before it is proven. So therefore, when I come to a question, you know, is reality here? It's like, well, all evidence suggests yes. So my assumption is yes. Now, give me some disproofs and I'll consider otherwise, but I don't feel like I'm obligated to consider anything that hasn't demonstrated a scrap of evidence. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that includes all of these possible metaphysical claims, you know, not only like an evil God in like Descartes' conception, who's altering our minds, or brain in a jar or whatever, but also like the universe is a hologram sort of stuff, right? Like, prove it, you know, like, I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's not like it's false until you give me the evidence. And right now evidence says not, right? So then I'm going to stay on not until evidence says otherwise. It's just, for me, it's that simple. I go where substantiation leads me, and my belief is accorded to my level of substantiation. So this is why I'm not a big S skeptic, right? Because a big S skeptic would require for me to start jettisoning that mentality. I'd have to start then going, oh, well, none of this is evidence. I'd have to start cutting off this juncture between between belief and substantiation. I'd have to start believing there couldn't be good substantiation, or that substantiation was somehow meaningless. And that's the reason why I'm not the big S skeptic.
Well, I guess like, so my whole thing is like, you know, I'm like a musician, an artist or whatever, and I honestly don't have the bandwidth to like have legitimate scientific, like heavy duty epistemology. Like I'm all into name dropping bays and all, but like, like I can't really spend that much time knowing the precise truth. And so like, I've sort of like taken a load off my shoulder by being like, you know, whatever, like, it's fucking the world, man. Like, we can be a little bit like, you know, sloppy and wishy-washy about it. But I know that there's always like this like world of scientific stuff to defer to, but I'm not going to try to chip away at that thing myself because I don't have the means to necessarily. But I'm sort of curious if there's like I don't know if you know like Connor Habib, but like he's like somebody putting forth like these ideas of like occult leftism, and I'm curious if there's something that's like a less intellectual branch that you think has any sort of potency or potential to it.
So explain what you mean by cult leftism.
Sorry, occult
leftism. I mean, there's some people that have that perspective. Yeah. I mean, it should be said that some has already been developed, but I am not personally interested in it. I'm certainly not reading any of it myself. As I understand it, this is something kind of like Nick Land goes more into, but I would not want to recommend people go read Nick Land because sometimes he's very reactionary, and definitely I wouldn't like support all of his politics. But that being said, yes, there is some of this taking place. Some people are definitely taking that approach. It should be said that in the modern era, we're seeing a resurgence of like Gnosticism, right? And stuff like that, which is, of course, having some overlap with leftism in general, but even more specifically with anarchism. If you think about the sorts of things I've said about anarchism, you can see how a lot of them are going to also, if you just take them up as tools and then just start applying them to things like epistemology, theology, metaphysics, you'll start to get some very occult sounding conclusions, right?
Mm-hmm.
You'll start getting things where it's like, you start asking questions about what is the actual, how is knowledge built, and what is information, and can any belief really be substantiated? What is substantiation, or what is valuable substantiation? And those are all interesting conversations. But I also feel like sometimes people will miss the point on the topics that we can the topics where we can actually come to solid conclusions about the answers, and the topics where sometimes what they're actually just doing is going, yeah, but what if weird thing? It's like, yeah, but what if alternative explanation this thing? And it's like, well, yeah, but I'm, as a scientific skeptic, I'm just like, evidence? Like I always have this very similar approach. But for me, I've chosen a general degree not to really get too bogged down in metaphysics, theology, or as general topics of conversation, because just really people have weird biases that they don't want to inspect, that they don't want to discuss, and that often will just break up coalitions that would function just fine if we had never had any of these arguments. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, I don't discuss those things generally because I don't want to get into a situation where we're breaking up useful coalitions. But insofar as how I feel about it, I don't believe in anything supernatural. The occult anything I don't think is real. Like it's like it might be a body of a body of knowledge and study, but it's not real insofar as how it talks about the world, in my opinion.
By the way, I'm realizing we're an hour, and I assume that you don't really have a time limit, but we can cut this right now.
We can go for a while. I'm good.
It'd be a great moment to just cut the podcast right there.
Yeah, right there, and that's it. That's it. Well, we're done.
So again, I totally agree. Like I don't believe that there are like spooky gods hanging out or whatever. But so like I feel like nearby this esoteric occult world is like the creative art world, and I guess I'm sort of curious where artists and like without like I feel like whenever people talk about art and politics, it gets so gross and cliche so quickly, and like I feel like there's some sort of innate skill that those types of people can contribute, because like I feel like my skill set is so much different from yours, where you have physics, you have political theory and stuff, and I'm just like I like fucking like chords, man. Like so I heard somebody say something about how oscillatory synchrony is so cheap or something, like you can like get a huge amount of synchrony out of just oscillatory effects, and as a musician that's what I deal with. So like how can musicians and creatives contribute to something that's like a positive emergent movement like that?
I mean, what I would say is that musicians are involved in the cultural component, right? I think one of the things that I've been really taking into consideration lately is the deep need of we typically are like, we look at like they're kind of like these two groups that we think are really important in politics, like the theoreticians, the people who make the theory, and then the activists or whatever, the organizers, and there you go, that's it. And it's like, no, there's also this vast cultural component that is mixed up in this whole process. And I think that, getting the ideas into the public consciousness is obviously one good thing that people can do. I think that insofar that like, for example, musicians just creating spaces for the ideas to be spread, right? Like, I mean, just insofar as like a practical example, but, this is obviously not exhaustive of the possible things you could do, is just like letting an anarchist table and have like pamphlets and stuff at the show that's being done. Or, for example, you're kind of doing a praxis right now, you're having me on your podcast, right? Like now I'm here spreading some anarchist ideas, right? But like, this is, I would say, more broadly, getting these basic ideas, the foundational precepts of what anarchism represents into the art that is being disseminated into society is obviously a good thing. obviously a powerful component in the whole process. And the usage of art in order to create community spaces, in order to repair atomization, to recreate the social aspect of humanity, to rekindle, mutuality and solidarity and all of that, I think it's highly valuable. Might I also add that just at a truly fundamental level, I think that creativity as an impulse, and I mean this just like way down at the root, like we have the construction and deconstruction, creation and destruction, both of these impulses are important, but the creative impulse is truly one of the most important parts of this whole project. And art is a pure representation of the creative impulse. It is the creative impulse freed. It's almost like we found all of the places where this is where only pure creation takes place, or the most pure creation where the least amount of destruction is mixed in. Like I think about a lot of art like that, and it's almost like it is the optimization of this payoff of creation and destruction. It's where creation is hyper maximized and destruction is very minimized, right? And so I don't know. I think it's a natural. I think it's the sort of thing that anarchists just value, insofar as the sort of society we would want to create is a society where creativity and art are flourishing, where this impulse is the one that society is built to fulfill, not the destructive impulse, not the impulse of domination or hierarchy, but instead one where all of those the organic social product of the people is freed from domination. That's so insofar as my view on it, yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I feel. I'll be talking a little bit about that creativity and destruction component in the upcoming video.
Oh yeah, so I guess like in my music, one of the things that I've been trying to disseminate is like roughly like animal rights-ish type stuff, or like animal welfare type stuff. And so in my mind, I'm like, well, I can't fucking have another layer of like shit that I'm like trying to put out there, like, and so I mean, like, I feel like I can't take on the duty of spreading a political message in addition to my own sort of like nearby messages. So is there anything more like, I guess like anything a little bit more subtle or abstract that the creative individual can do besides like nurturing their own creative impulse and sort of like setting that example of being generative?
I mean, that I would say is we're pretty abstract at that point. But I will say, insofar as that the thing that I think a lot of artists can do, it's to reclaim your alienated power, and that is to say, to use means ends unity. Insofar as that you're distributing your art, insofar as that you are producing music or publishing books or whatever it is. Do so through those publishers, which are essentially cooperatives, or create cooperatives together, such that don't create businesses that are corporations. Create worker self-directed enterprises, right? Like create cooperative structures such that what you build in the process of disseminating your art is a transformative thing, right? Like now you've built something that itself is a form of dual power and could be involved in a broader project. And then the art, whatever, make the art as you like, make it as you please, whatever message you like. I mean, obviously you don't want to do messages that are contrary to these needs, but like, build the dual power structure that distributes that stuff, disseminate power, distribute social power, get rid of monopoly where you find it. Oh, there's a bottleneck here, get rid of the bottleneck and the holding of power. These are valuable things that artists can do, and there is work being done on this front by people right now. There's starting to be now platforms that are cooperative platforms that are being developed that are owned by the artists that publish their stuff through it. I think these are really good ways in order to approach building that dual power, doing something actual praxis while being an artist.
So one of these sort of like similar strands of thought that I feel aligned with is like the cypherpunk movement, which I feel like is very anarchist in nature, but it's just like armed with cryptography. Is there any sort of realm of that, like cryptographically, like armed sort of world, like not necessarily even just cryptocurrency, but like encryption practices, or like all that type of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a general sense, I think some amount of cryptography would be good to have. It's interesting because I would say I understand the impulses to want to make everybody's votes completely anonymous through a bunch of these systems. But also part of democracy and part of building consensus is that you know who voted which way, and so that you can actually have dialogue with those people. If we anonymize everything, there's no dialogue. Everybody becomes more and more siloed off. And not only is nobody accountable for anything that they vote on, right? But we also just don't even have a way for these nodes to have feedback with one another. And it seems to me that reduces complexity in a way. It increases safety, but it increases safety in a way where you're just insulated from consequences for anything you've done, right? And it seems to me what I'm trying to do is recreate sociality. So I'm kind of wanting to go in the opposite direction in a way, insofar as that I want voting to be face-to-face. I want people to actually have to talk with each other when they make a decision. If you're going to make some terrible decision about how to treat somebody next to you, shouldn't you have to confront them? Shouldn't they have to know that it's you, that they live next to you and that you chose to subjugate them? Like these things are important. And I think it's actually, in many ways, I would like to go the opposite direction in that capacity. Now, that being said, does that mean that there's like no value to cryptography or no value to blockchain technologies or whatever people want to use? No, I'm not saying that. They might be able to be repurposed for certain very useful things. For example, I mean, we're not in our post-revolutionary society at this point. Okay, we need ways to communicate without being tracked by structures of authority. We need ways in order to distribute money which are not trackable. All of that stuff is going to be very useful. We'll need cryptography for all of that. And is that to say there's also zero value in such a usage of like cryptographic voting or whatever? No, maybe there's certain circumstances where that would be a good way to do it. And maybe even, it might be said, you could mix anonymization with discourse by having it to where the identity of the person who made the vote in real life is not necessarily open, but the person is a node that can be communicated with, where still everybody could send them angry messages, right? Yes. Like there would be some feedback, because they just like, well, nobody knows what username A3520 like so and so is, but that is a place they can send their angry messages, and that user will see the angry message, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like you're interested in like radical transparency, but that could be done through the means of cryptographic means.
Maybe I'm open to clever solutions to things, right? I think there's a tendency when people hear something unfamiliar to be afraid to some degree, because they don't know what to expect from it. Anarchists, as much as anybody else, they kind of would hear technology like that and be like, oh man, it's techno bro solutions to problems, and it's like, no, I mean, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't utilize available technologies if they're useful, but I also think that it needs to come along with the radical critique of what could go wrong with them in process, right? That's kind of my only worry about full anonymization of the voting process. You might actually they're making decisions that if they had to deal with repercussions, they would not do so. And of course, the flip side is like, oh, but then there might be threats, and people might try to coerce you, knowing who you are, into voting in some way, and then afterwards they're going to know if you did vote this certain way. Yeah, I mean, there's some truth to that, but as I said, there's the mirror of that now you can yourself with your vote coerce other people, and there's no way for them to do anything about it, right? So it has its ups and downs. And I'd always be interested in hearing people do good analysis of the two. But it seems to me that the drive towards full anonymization is a desire to reproduce the complete lack of accountability that's seen within a liberal republic, what we already have, right? Where we already try to anonymize out everybody's votes, where nobody knows how anybody voted, because we all just like want a civil society where the people doing the subjugating get along with the people who are being subjugated. And it's like, I don't see any reason why the people who are being subjugated should have to get along with the people who are subjugating them. You know, like the people who are doing the subjugating should be able to be held accountable. There should be repercussions for doing terrible things to other people. That's part of how a society functions, right? So yeah, I don't know. I think that's a complex topic. It's definitely not one that I would give just a blanket answer about, right? Just kind of present my feelings about worries that I might have, the direction I would like to go instead, you know?
So, I mean, you mentioned like somebody just having like...
We are attempting to get rid of situations where certain people have control of the total social flow of power, right? So there's like, you might imagine that like power originates from below, right? Or power comes from the us utilizing the ecology. It comes from us being able to achieve our ends, essentially. And what the anarchist wants is for everybody together to have a cooperative control over that total social flow of power. Not just for the people that stand at some juncture of like deservedness, like they're like, we get rid of this concept of just because you're the gatekeeper, you deserve to be able to extract a toll kind of thing, right? And instead we start to understand that all of society is fundamentally reliant on all other parts of society. You know, that there is no way for us to talk about an individual owning a thing when that thing was produced by so much, by this massive web of interconnections, which can never truly be obscured out of the process. They can only be ignored, right? And I think that's kind of what it really comes down to. I would say, let me see if I can find this Kropotkin quote real quick. What is he? It's interesting. Yeah, here we go. Millions of human beings have labored to create this civilization on which we pride ourselves today. Other millions scattered through the globe labor to maintain it. Without them, nothing would be left in 50 years but ruins. There is not even a thought or an invention which is not common property born of the past and the present. Thousands of inventors, known and unknown, who have died in poverty, have cooperated in the invention of each of these machines which embody the genius of man. Science and industry, knowledge and application, discovery and the practical realization leading to new discoveries, cunning of brain and of hand, toil of mind and muscle, all work together. Each discovery, each advance, each increase in the sum of human riches owes its being to the physical and mental travail of the past and the present.
So I guess like, you know, you mentioned like the interconnected web of everything. And in my mind, I'm just thinking of that as like some sort of like I guess I'm visualizing it like an oscilloscope or something like that. And so it's like, how do we make this into a beautiful geometry? And I heard somebody talking about what's it, like the Dunbar number? They were talking about like if we had like a crazy high Dunbar number, how to get it to like a scale of that nature with, quote, the right geometry. And so like this idea of like the right geometry or sort of like the harmonic quality of it is like how I can't help but thinking of it as. So like, what is the right geometry for the sort of final situation that you imagine here?
Just increasing the Dunbar number. I think that's a tall order. I think that probably there's some amount of social construction that can be done, some amount of the reconstruction of infrastructure and where people are literally located in proximity to one another and the sorts of people they come in contact with in a variety of different ways. I think you could probably bump that number up. But I think that there's probably also some fundamental limits to human cognition that make to where that number is not going to go to, you know, it's going to have a limit, right? And for me, I'm not even certain that the solution is to create a Dunbar number the size of humanity, because I don't know that's literally possible. We're not like demigods, right?
Well, I mean, forget that I mentioned Dunbar. Just like in a sort of like beautiful society of your envisioning, is there any sort of like, I mean, just to like put it in more like wishy-washy creative terms, like, is there any sort of like harmonic or geometric or textural quality to it that you could like reduce to some sort of, quality like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think self-organized criticality or emergence is essentially what's being discussed right there, right? When we're talking about, this sort of like harmonic, where, like you said, you have these oscillations, and the oscillations, if all you do is just change their staggering a little bit, you get like crazy, like constructive interference, and it's like double, what either of them would have been by themselves, and you get these like, this can definitely happen in a social sense. And I guess what I'm really saying is, my understanding is how you're going to get to that harmonic quality is through this creation of these dynamics that I've described, reducing the monopoly on the social flow of power, getting rid of all this infinite degree of thresholds that takes place, where every single person reduces the amount of information that's taking place in the situation. Instead, creating a more direct distributions, creating decentral coordination, and allowing the actual agents in the system to be able to shift and move and adapt to their circumstances. If you don't have that, you can't have harmonization. You can't have emergence. You can't have self-organized criticality. All you get is a machine life. And so I guess what I would say is, anarchism is that harmonic, right? Anarchism is the desire to discover that harmonic in humanity. And that's all, to a significant degree, the way I've come to think of it,
Yeah, I guess like in my mind, I'm just like, how can we put this in terms of like a tuning problem? Like, I don't know if you've ever done like a biofeedback thing or like a neurofeedback. Have you ever tried any of that?
No.
It's interesting because like, you can put like a little sensor on, and it will like tell you kind of like how sympathetic or parasympathetic you are. And having just that simple feedback of like, okay, I need to like make this thing turn from red to green by changing my mood. I'm wondering if there's some sort of way that could happen on a more societal level, where it's like, it's not necessarily that we have any sense of what we're doing to get to the correct place, but we have some sort of feedback that is telling us like, this is how resonant we are. And if everybody sort of like just sees that like, oh shit, it's on red today, like, I know that I'm taking some small part in that. How can I make it go to green? I just feel like in some ways, like the intellectual thing is a barrier. And if there's like a felt path there, then like that might be like easier to get more people sort of organized, or like, I don't know. I feel like I'm like just going down esoteric territory.
No, I mean, I get what you're saying. It's like the kind of thing that's obviously would be ideal if it can be carried out. I think it's probably, the problem is the development of such technology that could do the process we're looking for. Certainly not impossible, I don't think, but it's going to be a challenge, and I'd be interested to see anybody who could pull off such a challenge. But I think the dynamic that would be at play here is the dynamic of trust and secrecy. This interplay between us trusting others, or us believing that others are kind of like out to get us. And it's kind of based around this, the interplay of mutuality and competition, right? If you believe that it's like a dog eat dog world, you believe that everybody's in competition with one another, you're going to have a tendency to reproduce that in your life. You're going to have a tendency to carry out this dog eat dog mentality, and to treat others that way, then they're going to start to feel that way, and it ripples out, right? So obviously the dynamics are real, and they do have an effect. If one could develop some, app or whatever that would give people feedback that would help them be aware of a broader a social milieu of trust and all of that, yeah, could be valuable, could help people.
I mean, I think some people are trying to I think the economists would want us to think that GDP is that like biofeedback or something like. But there's got to be a better method of doing it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, no, I'm sad to say that I think that delusion is like that belief you're saying about their delusion might unfortunately be correct. But yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with the GDP. I think it definitely has something to do with a lot more with very fundamental human emotions. The actual content of what our species heritage is, which is more this cooperative instinct. It is more this mutuality. It is the storage and relayance of information, and that's really what we're trying to improve. We're trying to bring complexity back to humanity, trying to fight back against the mechanization of human beings.
What about like some sort of method where, like, instead of sort of like creating a system where the end result is sort of a higher quality of life, or like a more positive valence to things, what if you distribute more positive valence before you figure out the system that would yield that? As in, like, let's say some technology comes around that like raises everybody's hedonic set point significantly. I mean, and this sounds like it would be some sort of pharmacology, but is there any sort of version of that in your world, or any sort of version of that you disagree with in a nearby world?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some pitfalls to that approach. At first, I was thinking about, I was like, okay, I mean, that's an interesting thing, but then I kind of started to think through problems. One of the problems is that if all you try to do is increase whatever this, you derive a metric, and the metric is, for example, let's say quality of life, but then that metric just becomes what you're focused on. Well, the problem is you're probably going to reduce out all of the detail that isn't that metric, right? So, quality of life is what we choose. So then does that mean, like, in this immediate term sense, I just want to increase quality of life? Then I just want to demand reforms. Oh, well, then social democracy is what I actually want. I'm just going to go vote for people, and then we're all going to vote really good. We're going to reduce the amount of suffering. We're going to raise the minimum wage. But the problem is what if that means can never get to the other ends? What if the ends actually require you to suffer a little bit in the meantime? What if there's going to be some self-sacrifice involved in creating that better world, and it's going to require a transition, a bridge of challenge in between, right? Where things are not gonna, it's not just gonna be that everything just goes 100% in that direction, that there's gonna be sacrifices. And so it's not to say that you're like, that idea is like categorically wrong. It's just to say that I could see it falling into such a path of argumentation, I guess you'd say.
I feel like somebody like David Lynch, when he's sort of getting woo-woo about his transcendental meditation stuff, it's like there's some quote where it's like, if 1% of the population could achieve transcendence through this meditation, then like there will be world peace or something. And where it's like I feel like he's saying, like, the point of criticality is getting this many people to know how to get to bliss, and then it will spread. And so, like, I mean, that definitely sounds like implausible, but
that's like it's like a Buddhist vanguardism or something.
Yeah, I mean, with the whole crypto world, I'm just like wondering if there's a way to incentivize getting to states of transcendence and bliss, like algorithmically.
Yeah, I think the problem is that if it takes place inside of this system, it's going to be fundamentally embedded within what can provide that state of bliss within this society. And therefore it's kind of limited to whatever the conditions of society are, because it holds that bliss is in relation to the society that you were within, right? So of course, somebody who's like transcendental is going to say, well, no, in fact, part of what the transcendental process is escaping what this society has told you is necessary, and you discover that really quick. They would obviously be correct in that process. But the problem is that if we didn't have this transcendental mindset, and all we were trying to do is just create the state of bliss, this could justify, for example, us escaping into simulations, whereas off in the distance, the simulations are being powered by, the deaths of people in other countries. And, we've maximized our bliss. I'm doing good, buddy. I mean, I'm sorry about all that imperialism over there and extractivism destroying your environment and your people, but I maximized bliss. Okay, I maximized, so we're good now. I'm 1% of bliss holders. I've got all the bliss over here. soon enough, you guys will get some bliss, right? Like, I mean, it's like, I don't think it's necessarily how it works. I think that the ideas have to have some conception of what it is that they demand of a new society, right? They have to have revolutionary demands, that the actual fundamental structure of society be rebuilt such that it produces a better life, understanding what it is that brings them misery and seeking to get rid of the actual structures that bring the misery, as opposed to their incidental misery.
So, I mean, you say structures that bring misery. So I'm curious, you've mentioned some stuff about like anti-work stuff. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about that. Like, I forget, who's the dude that wrote that essay about like the anti-work revolution?
The one you had mentioned to me, I think, was Bob Black.
Yeah. I don't know anything about him, but I'm curious about what that sort of looks like in your mind, that general realm.
So I haven't read a whole lot of anti-work literature. I just kind of know what the general perspective of the anti-work is. And it should be said that largely what is being discussed here is people are talking about the end of coerced labor, right? That's really what the discussion is about. And it kind of roots all the way back to the roots of leftist thought, which is that this coerced labor, wage labor in the modern era, slave era, labor in previous eras, serf labor throughout the, a whole era of monarchy. These are all miserable forms of life. These are all miserable forms. Your actual labors as a person, your creative capacities are being taken from you, and then they're being reoriented to serve the needs of someone who is actually your subjugator, somebody who actually has all the power over you. And so not only are they your subjugator by use of other people's violence upon you, they get to use your labor to perpetuate their subjugation over you. So it's a miserable circumstance under any circumstances. So what is the anti-work position? The anti-work position is the abolition of this coerced form of labor, right? So, you might get a bunch of people making this argument. I'll say, insofar as Bob Black, as a person, from what I gather, kind of a questionable guy, has some questionable positions. That's all I'm going to say about that. But he's not the only one who writes about it. Once, as I said, it has a through line all the way back to the beginning. But what you'll find is the reason why that this literature even has to be written is because there was a fetishization of work, as per the working class having this extremely strong work ethic because it had been disciplined into working, right? So it's like, what is its strength? It produces everything. So it's not bad that they work. They should be proud of the fact that they are disciplined workers, and they should use that power in order to bring forward a new society. That makes sense in an abstract sense, right? But when you start to understand what that's saying, it is to say, I'm going to free myself by continuing the very cycle of coerced labor, which gives me misery. I'm going to create a society on the back and the necessity of the very coerced labor I'm trying to escape. So the anti-work position is actually, no, we're trying to dismantle the system. We're trying to decrease the amount of coerced labor and try to increase the amount of freely willed or internally motivated creative labor that we do. And I can see that perspective. And I get the arguments. In a general sense, I agree with the arguments as they stand. The question, of course, comes back to something we kind of discussed, which is, to what degree must there be self-sacrifice? To what degree must there be suffering as the bridge to a greater success? I think that that's a crucial question that has to be asked. And once again, it also feeds in with means-end unity and how closely can we actually get them matched, That's all. These are all big, complex topics that are all connected with one another,
I mean, it's such a complex thing. Don't you feel like there's some level, I don't want to say hopelessness, but like the idea of like a bunch of people, like, I feel like, I'm like over here just being like artsy fartsy guy, like trying to like talk about politics with politics guy. And, I feel like I'm a smart dude, and like, I'm just like, whoa. like this is a big world of stuff to internalize. So I mean, like, do you just
yeah,
really
I mean,
do you depend on everybody being sort of well-intentioned and intelligent?
no, I think that, you know, for me, a lot of this project, I am taking on the role of an artist, which is to say, I am producing the work that I think naturally comes from my creative urges. My creative urges is to produce this deep level of theory, to analyze and inspect philosophy at a deep level, and to produce it in such a way that other people might want to listen to that topic. Do I think that everybody needs to grasp it at the scale that I am discussing and understand all of these fields of study and understand all of the? No, I think part of if there is any, you know, praxis to developing this theory and to developing all of these ideas, it is that we then can hand them over to new people, and those people can have them in mind and then apply them in one way or another. So my ideas are meant to persuade those who want to listen for the most part, because probably you're not going to engage with the level of theory that I'm writing on my channel unless you're interested in these topics. Right. So I'm just going to keep developing it at that level. But I'm also endeavoring in other places to develop in, you know, a way that's a layer down and a layer down and a layer down and all the way down the layers until we're talking about quippy little sayings, you know, like 3-word slogans and stuff, you know. All of that has to be there. And not only because each of those might be the place that a person is and the kind of knowledge that they need in order to get their head around it, right? But also because it's kind of like a ladder, you know. Oh, you start down here. Oh, there's this little layer just up from that. Okay, that's easy because it reminds me of this one a little bit, but a little more depth, a little more depth, a little more. Oh, and some people might want to skip 3 layers up. Some people might want to go, oh, I got the first ideas, I'm ready to read Das Kapital by Marx. You know what I'm saying? Like, but like having all of it there allows people to engage at the level they're interested in. And my channel was realizing no one, like on YouTube, is engaging at the very top level, right? Like at the top level where it's like, oh, okay, we're just going to talk about the ideas as they are, as they exist within the literature. I'm going to try not to cut out any more detail than is necessary. I'm going to talk about it at the level that I think gives due credence to each of the ideas and the people who they came from. I'm not going to deceive or oversimplify and so on. But I think that people have to do it at every single scale. You, of course, came in with you know, just being like, okay, let's just ask the biggest, hardest questions that are like the most overarching, and I'm just going to let Daniel ramble for 20 minutes on every single thing I ask. And like, yeah, I mean, you know, maybe not the greatest place for somebody to start on these topics. In fact, when I was thinking about this, I was like, I have never had this detail of discussion on any other podcast I've gone on. And then I realized just because this is what, you know, your questions, you chose these questions, complex systems analysis. What are you doing, John? That's not, it's not podcast material.
Yeah, it's funny, like for anybody listening, if they're still listening at this point, you know, like Daniel and I, when we talk, like, you know, when we see each other, which is every like year-ish maybe, but I feel like it's usually like a super tunnel vision conversation, kind of at the expense of everybody else that we're with. And then like somebody will come in and be like, oh, do you want like a beer? And then we're just like,
beer. Oh yeah. Oh, like, right. Yes. We're at a party. Like, oh yeah, I forgot.
Interrupted in the middle of something private or something.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, I just wanted to resume with these crazy conversations.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I kind of throw you for a different loop by bringing in occult references and stuff.
Yeah, well, no, I enjoy this conversation. The truth is this like feels very much like the conversations I had in a physics major. You know what I'm saying? Or like when I was doing like lots of philosophy class. It kind of reminds me of a more academic discussion, but it's not one that I get to have very often because most people don't really, you know, they're not engaging at that layer of depth, you know. And so yeah, I mean, this is the really ridiculously complex level of it, and I haven't even gone into all the philosophical foundations and the history and all of that stuff. And yeah, but this is a description of my approach, a systems approach to anarchism, you might say.
I'm curious. I know that you do like sci-fi writing and stuff, and I know that you're working on a philosophy book.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to share any details about that, or is that still low key?
What have you done? What are you doing? Oh, you were like, Daniel, we've gone too in depth. Just tell me about all of those philosophical underpinnings now. Okay, but yeah, no, I write fiction, and I've been writing fiction since I was like 15. So it's been like 20 years of practice, and I'm pretty good at it. In fact, before I started doing political theory, the only thing anybody who knew me for was for art, was for creating fiction and world building. I love creating fictional worlds and thinking about, all of those and writing stories within them and all of that. But yeah, no, I wrote a science fiction book. I tried to get it published for a little while, but then I ran out of steam. I could probably go back and try to start getting an agent again. But I'm also writing a philosophy book, and the philosophy book might be seen as sort of the structure I'm kind of telling way up here at this meta level. It's like builds that starting from like, what is knowledge? Like what is being? What gives something the status of being, and what gives it its qualities, and then building up into epistemology, and then building up from there into what ethics is, and then building up into a meaning, what a theory of meaning as well, and then building into eventually up into the full political structure. But this time, instead of expressed in the broader philosophical terms that I use on the channel, it's described within the philosophical terminology that is developed in the philosophy I'm developing. Gotcha. And that philosophy is a process ontology, like getting really crunchy in the names at this point, but a process ontology is essentially the belief that a thing has its state of being based upon how it functions as a process.
Okay.
So its process and how it continues and changes over time, like a feedback loop, is what determines what kind of thing it is. But mine also has some component that things have these sort of essential identities. So it's a process ontology that still has some concept of identity mixed in with it. The things have an identity in and of themselves, but they are also the things defined through process and relation to other things. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know who the heck the audience for that is. Once again, like I said, I have like it's very much like the artist's approach, where it's like, who's the audience? I'm not creating it for them necessarily. I'm just creating it because it seems like the thing I want to create. Like it's what's coming out of me. And being an artist trained me to learn how to funnel that which just organically arrives from me and from my desires. It taught me how to funnel that into a work, into a thing which was a representation of those desires, those creative desires. And what you learn as an artist is that in order to facilitate that process properly, you have to almost like be fearless. Like you have to. It's not about creating necessarily what somebody else is going to want. It's about creating what comes out of you, right? And so, yeah, I mean, once again, I guess that's the idea of how I've written this philosophy book, because I don't know who the hell is going to read a philosophy book that wants to start you, that is like, let me introduce you to anarchism, and then it starts you at ontology. What is wrong with you? That is, but like, that's it's, to me, it's like it's a work insofar as that I kind of want it to be almost like an anarchist Bible, like this is a holistic worldview. This doesn't only tell you how to approach politics. This doesn't only tell you about how to reorganize society. This will give you an understanding of the world and how your political belief is embedded within a broader philosophical dialogue and what that means for the rest of the world. And so in a way, it's almost like the book that if somebody were trying to understand all of the arcane stuff that I'm saying, it's like, well, here you go. Understand what's in here and you'll understand everything I'm saying,
So you're saying the underlying things are ontology, like some sort of value theory, like ethics, and what else are you saying here? Or are the other like?
Well, I believe that there's an order of operations here. I believe that the most fundamental thing that you can reason about in philosophy is ontology, which is to say that what makes things be, right? What makes things be?
I mean, is that like the something from nothing type question? Is that in there? Or
Kind of. I'm not saying what made them come into being. I'm saying what describes what they are and what their fundamental dynamics are as things that are. And so that's like, what makes stuff what it is. And then that's mixed. That's like either a subfield or is related to the concept of metaphysics, right? Okay. What is stuff made of? You have materialism, you have idealism, the ideas that, oh, it's made of material stuff. Oh, it's made of ideas and conceptions. There's all these answers in philosophy, right? But I feel like you have to answer those before you can really develop anything above it. And then I think that from there, you can start to build a theory of the human being. And in the process, you will begin to understand meaning, what meaning is in that process. And as you begin to understand meaning, the human being, what reality is, how knowledge is gathered, you will then be able to build a system of ethics. You then can understand what things will be best for the system you're looking at. You've developed an understanding of how the system works. So what's the best outcomes for that system? Mm-hmm. Then from there, you will be able to just understand politics writ large. Why indeed do we do what we do in politics? And what I found is that if you do a full, robust analysis of politics, you end up back at philosophy eventually. You end up all the way back at stuff like process. Like, oh, why are means intertwined with ends? Because I'm a feedback loop. Because when I act, I change the world. And when the world acts upon me, it changes me. And that is a cyclic process. And I can't just imagine a beginning and an end point. I have to know what the process that brings me from one end to the other is, right? Mm-hmm. So it's intertwined, but it often has to be obscured precisely for the reasons that you've described. Because how the hell could I ever get to discussing what anarchism is with somebody if I didn't have an entire lecture series, if I'm starting from that things are defined through process and identity and all of that? Like, it's not possible. So instead, what we do is we learn to communicate the concepts 5 layers up, right? Mm-hmm. And so the book is attempting to start at layer 1 at the very basis and work up from there. And I've had some people, educated people, argue to me, if we use what you're saying as to be true, then you should start with logic. And maybe that's true. I don't know, because they would say logic precedes, because if logic is what the underpinning of existence is, then existence is reliant upon what logic is, which may be true. But I don't know if I got time for that. We'll find out.
Right. I guess interesting. So I mean, like, for some reason I'm just thinking like, logic and like Boolean as like some sort of superposition of truth and falsehood. I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but I'm curious to just like get a quick credence on consciousness. Because if you're starting it with ontology, do you have any sort of like model of consciousness that you subscribe to?
Yeah, I think consciousness is an emergent property of a system that is, okay, I'm not going to use technical terms then, a system that has relations that are very well internally adjusted. Okay, so its internal adjustments to itself are very organically constituted, you might say. Mm-hmm. And its relations to its outside environment are also dynamic and organically constituted. That is to say, it's in strong feedback with its outside environment. So it's in strong feedback with itself, and it's in strong feedback with the outside environment. And this is all holistically intertwined. This is when you find, I believe, one of the things that leads to emergence of consciousness. It's also what leads to the emergence of complexity in a general sense. Mm-hmm. But I would say further than this, I think one of the most fundamental things for a consciousness to exist is for it to have an array of reprogrammable nodes.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, just insofar as talking about a fully technical reasoning here, right? For example, in the brain, neurons and synapses, right? We're talking about the actual, what's reprogrammable? The networks of neurons and synapses, the chemical flows that are in feedback with those networks. The networks themselves are that one node being on by itself means very little, but as soon as it becomes networked with a bunch of other nodes, you begin to find that it builds everything, right? It can build our entire conceptions of existence. And the same thing, imagine, for example, in an AI, okay, they're trying to figure out how do you program an AI, and they're trying to figure out all these ways, and they're like taking this very top-down approach, this very, centralistic mindset, like, oh, we're going to give it this quality and that quality and this quality, and it doesn't do anything, just like this dead machine that does nothing significant. But notice, as soon as what they did was they created what's called a secret layer, where there's just a layer of reprogrammable nodes for which they have no interaction and can't even really figure out what the hell's going on. If they allow that layer to exist, boom, we get modern AI. AI begins to arise. We start to get weird emergent properties. It's so good at things we never would have even thought it would be good at, right? And that's because it has this array of reprogrammable nodes that by themselves are just like kind of on-off switch, right? But as soon as they are networked together, are like ways to store the relations of information that the system is coming in contact with. So for our brains, in our neurology, once again, neurons and synapses, in the secret layer, the nodes that it has available, that are available to it. But I would say also, this is like in a dynamic process with how the universe creates complexity. Atoms might be seen as a series of reprogrammable nodes that also derive almost all of their utility from the networking of them with one another. I think these are some of the most fundamental dynamics at play. Lastly, I would say something I'm interested in is something that Michio Kaku said one time. And he said that he thought there was a quanta of consciousness, and it's the feedback loop. And that the more feedback loops you build up in a system, the more conscious it becomes.
Interesting. I'm
not sure if it's that simple. I might be. I don't know. I'm willing to entertain it. But, then we get kind of like a pantheism kind of thing where it's like, oh, well, the whole universe is feedback loops. Oh, well, quantum systems are an infinite number of feedback loops. Are quantum systems super conscious? And it's like, I start to kind of have these sorts of questions. But I get what he's saying insofar as, it seems like as you create these bigger and bigger assemblies of feedback cycles, you allow the substrate for consciousness to begin. Right. So I guess without going into like neurobiology and stuff, which is not my subject of strength, those are kind of my general insights as to what I think produces consciousness.
Are you into like Hofstadter, Douglas Hofstadter?
I actually have good old Escher Bach on my shelf, but let's see how far I got it. I'll get it.
I think that's everybody's favorite book to claim that they've read.
I'm not going to claim it. I've got that far through. Yeah. That's how far through. There you go.
I have a buddy who was always like, yeah, man, girl Escher Bach, and then be like, so what is it about? And he's like, just like no answer. Yeah, I have a strange loop, or I am a strange loop somewhere around here. Oh, right here. And I started it, but I
think that over the years, just recollecting what I had read in here, I actually do numerous times think about how he also might have been kind of intimating some of that, something about how feedback loops and an iteration is an extremely important phenomenon. So yeah, I think iteration is extremely important, but I don't think iteration is just like something unique to consciousness. I think iteration is down at the base of existence, right? Iteration is existence. The fact that there is 1 second and then 2 seconds and 3 seconds is the universe iterating itself across the seconds. You know what I'm saying? So iteration is a fundamental precept of existence as far as I'm concerned. But I'd be interested.
That's what you need for criticality, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't have you won't have, if a system doesn't have iteration, it doesn't move. And a system that doesn't move can't achieve self-organized criticality because self-organized criticality comes from the agents having particular qualities as they move through time. So then if it's just like, you can't even have emergence or anything without time moving. In fact, it might be said, the only state in which it looks like time wasn't moving was before the Big Bang, and there was zero dynamics to anything. You know what I'm saying? So it almost seems like for existence to exist, time has to move. And that kind of fits that logic, the iterative logic, So I won't claim that I know what's in here, but I kind of have some recollection that he was kind of aiming at this similar sort of conclusion.
Word. Well, I feel like I don't need to keep you longer than the 2 hours. I mean, is this book done and you just need to like get it out there, or you still?
No, this is a long process. Well, the science fiction book is finished.
The book, huh?
Yeah, it's a long project. Oh my God, the science fiction book is complete. And hey, if anybody in your audience wants to publish my science fiction book, just get a hold of John and see what you do. But as far as the philosophy book, no, I mean that might be a life goal kind of thing. The scale of what I'm describing there is kind of ridiculous. I could be in my 40s before I finish that.
Gotcha. Okay. I was just going to try to hustle it if needed, but
no, hustle the science fiction book. Yeah, I want to let's get that published.
Well, anything else you want to mention before we sign off?
Go visit my channel. I promise that there are videos that are nowhere near this level of depth. You can find very variable level of depth, I promise. If you end up liking my work, go become a patron. I'm just finally starting to transition into a life where my Patreon is paying enough that I could quit one of my jobs, which is awesome. Yeah.
That's great.
So now I have one job and the Patreon, and that's my income stream. So go look at the stuff. I'm also on Twitter at Anark YouTube, if you want to find me on there, where I just pretty much just fight with authoritarian leftists all day. That's my entire life on Twitter. There's nothing else.
You don't even fucks with the authoritarian rightists?
I mean, I do. Yeah, I do. But it's like at this point, it's like I've said everything I'm going to say. Like all it is just us antagonizing each other. It's literally just, it just escalates so quickly to like, well, see you on the opposite side of a firearm, like it's just like it's like that's the end result of arguing with fascists. But yeah, no, I mean, I'll pretty much talk with anybody on Twitter so long as they're not bad faith actors, Right. But fascists are pretty much always bad faith actors. So anyway.
Cool, man. Well, Daniel, thanks for talking to me. Everybody should check out Anark on YouTube and tour, like he said. But yeah, thanks for joining me. It was a fun conversation that's gone a lot of places. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good, dude. Peace.